No one would buy her, abandoned without clothes in a Wild West market, until a rancher saw her. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty streets of the small Wild West town. The market was alive with noise. Horses clopping on the dirt, traders shouting about the price of cattle, barrels of flour, and bolts of cloth. Children ran through the crowd, chasing each other and laughing, while their parents argued with shopkeepers over the cost of goods. The smell of fresh bread mixed with dust and horse manure, and the heat shimmered above the wooden stalls. Amidst all this chaos, a young girl sat alone on the edge of the market. Her name was Clara. She was small for her age, her face streaked with dirt, her hair tangled and matted from weeks of wandering. She had no shoes, and the coarse dirt bit at her bare feet with every movement. Her clothes, once a simple dress, were gone, leaving her in a thin, tattered undershirt and a pair of shorts too small to cover her properly. She hugged herself tightly, trying to block out the stares and whispers of those who passed by. Clara's eyes were wide with fear and uncertainty. She had been left there early in the morning by someone she had trusted, someone who had promised to take care of her. But now that person was gone, and the crowded market felt enormous and unkind. She glanced around, hoping to see a familiar face, someone who might help her, but all she saw were strangers with busy lives. Farmers and merchants didn't notice her. Children laughed at her appearance, or stared with curiosity, but no one offered a hand. Time passed slowly. The heat seemed to press down on her small shoulders, making her feel even smaller. Clara tried to move closer to the shade of a stall, but the merchants shook their heads, waving her away, muttering that she should leave or find her own way. The girl shivered, not only from the slight chill of the wind brushing over her thin clothes, but from the emptiness she felt in her chest. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and she wished she could remember the last time she had eaten properly. She thought of the people she had known before this moment, faces of friends she had lost, family she barely remembered. Their warmth seemed like a distant dream now, fading as quickly as the dust in the wind. Tears threatened to fall, but she blinked them back.
She had learned, even at her young age, that crying did not help when no one was around to care.
Clara tried to make herself small, curling into a ball on the ground. She imagined herself invisible, hoping that if no one saw her, perhaps she could find a way to disappear until someone kind passed by. She remembered stories of other children she had heard whispered in the streets, stories of girls and boys who were found by strangers, given food, and taken to warm homes. Clara hoped more than anything that her story could be the same, that someone would notice her before the sun sank behind the horizon and the market emptied. Hours crept by. The shadows grew longer, stretching across the wooden planks of the stalls. The noise of the market began to quiet, but the fear in Clara's heart did not lessen. She could feel the weight of being alone pressing down on her like a stone. She shifted slightly, trying to find a more comfortable position on the hard, uneven ground, but the dirt was unforgiving, scraping her knees and arms. Her stomach growled, and she wished for even a simple piece of bread, a drop of water, anything to give her a little strength. Clara's mind wandered as she waited. She remembered a time when she had felt safe, when someone had smiled at her, and the warmth of that memory made her feel a faint spark of hope. But hope was a fragile thing. Each passing minute that no one approached her made the spark flicker dangerously. She watched people moving in and out of the market, men carrying sacks of grain, women balancing baskets of vegetables on their arms, children tugging at their parents' skirts. None of them looked at her. None of them seemed to care. She tried calling out softly at first. "Excuse me. Please, can someone help me?" But her voice was tiny, swallowed by the sound of the market. She tried again, louder this time, but only a few heads turned briefly, and then people went back to their own business. The girl felt her chest tighten with a mixture of fear and despair. She realized that she was truly alone, and that realization made her shiver even more than the wind. As the day wore on, Clara's thoughts turned to survival. She had to keep herself awake, to keep herself alert. The market might seem kind in the morning, but the Wild West was full of dangers. Strangers could be cruel, animals could be unpredictable, and hunger could make her weak. She scanned the market for anything she could use, perhaps a discarded piece of bread, a scrap of cloth for warmth, but the ground was bare. People walked past without noticing the small figure crouched among the dust and debris. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. The market was quieter now, and the crowds thinner. Clara's muscles ached from sitting in the same position for hours, and her body trembled from exhaustion. Still, she refused to move from the edge of the market. She believed that if she left, she might never be found. The edge of the marketplace had become her little island of hope, the place where she prayed someone kind would notice her. Even as she sat there, she imagined the kind stranger who might arrive. The person who would see her not as a burden, not as a curiosity, but as a human being in need. Maybe it would be a farmer or a woman carrying baskets of fresh fruit. Maybe it would be a man who worked on the ranch outside of town. She closed her eyes and pictured their warm smile, their gentle hands offering food and clothing. It was a small dream, but it kept her going. As the shadows deepened and the market's sounds faded into a distant murmur, Clara's hope flickered like a candle in the wind. She could not know that tonight her life would soon change. Someone was about to notice the small girl abandoned in the dirt, a person who would see past her tattered clothes and dirt-streaked face to the brave, gentle heart inside. But for now she waited, shivering and tired, yet still daring to believe that kindness existed in the world. Her story, though filled with fear and uncertainty, was just beginning. And in the heart of that crowded, dusty marketplace, a single, small figure reminded the town that even the weakest could hold the strongest hope, painting the sky with shades of orange, gold, and soft pink. Clara's small figure was still crouched near the edge of the market, her knees scraped, her hands covered in dirt, and her body trembling from exhaustion. She tried to stay awake, pressing her thin arms around herself for warmth, but fatigue weighed heavily on her. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and her throat was parched. She had watched the market bustle all day, hoping someone would notice her, and now that hope was beginning to fade. Shadows stretched long across the wooden stalls, and the market had begun to empty. Traders were packing up their goods. Children were being pulled home by their parents, and the sounds of bartering and laughter were replaced by the occasional creak of wagon wheels or the lowing of cattle being led away. The noise of the day had quieted, but the feeling of loneliness had only grown stronger. Clara felt as if the bustling world had shrunk, leaving her alone in a vast empty space. Her stomach growled and she felt dizzy from hunger. Bah! She tried to remember the last time she had eaten a proper meal. It had been many days ago, and the memory of warm bread and fresh milk made her ache. She wished for even a small crumb of bread, something to ease the emptiness in her belly. She looked around at the scattered scraps and discarded pieces of cloth, but the ground was bare, except for dust and small pebbles. Each moment that passed without food made her feel weaker, and fear began to creep in, like a shadow over her heart. As the market emptied, Clara noticed that the adults who had passed her by earlier now seemed more hurried, their eyes focused only on getting home before dark. She tried calling out again, her voice hoarse and trembling. "Please, can someone help me?" But no one slowed down. A man with a cart of vegetables barely glanced at her, and a mother tugged her child away, whispering about staying out of trouble. Breaking. Clara felt the sting of rejection, the deep ache of being invisible. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back, refusing to cry openly. She had learned quickly that crying alone offered no comfort. She shifted slightly, hugging her knees tighter, trying to keep herself warm. The wind picked up, carrying dust and bits of hay across the street. Clara shivered. She wrapped her arms more tightly around herself and tried to focus on the small sounds of life around her. The distant bark of a dog, the creak of a wagon, the faint laughter of children heading home. Each sound reminded her of the world outside, her loneliness, and a small part of her wanted to run toward it, but another part of her was afraid. She did not know where she could go, and she feared that moving might only make her more lost and alone. Her mind drifted to the people she had once known, or thought she knew. Faces of friends, neighbors, and family members flashed in her memory. Break. Some had been kind, but many had left her, and now she had no one to turn to. The thought made her chest ache. She felt the weight of being truly alone for the first time in her life. Fear grew like a shadow in her heart. Desperate. She feared the dark, feared the cold night, and feared that no one would ever care about her again. Clara tried to distract herself by watching the few people still lingering in the market. A young boy ran past carrying a small basket of apples. He laughed as he stumbled over a stone and quickly got up again, brushing himself off. Clara watched him and felt a pang of longing. She wished she could laugh like that, play without fear, and feel safe. But the small, cruel thought that no one would notice her unless she made herself visible made her hesitate. She had learned to stay small, to avoid attention, but now she wondered if perhaps being small meant that no one would ever help her. Shrinking as close to the ground as possible, but the world continued around her. The wind blew stronger now, and the temperature dropped slightly as evening approached. Clara's teeth chattered and she rubbed her arms quickly, trying to create some warmth. Her body ached from sitting too long in the same position, her muscles stiff and sore. She thought of the soft bed she had once slept in, a place that now felt like a dream from another life. She longed for comfort, for someone to care about her, to offer even a small kindness in a harsh world. Desk hunger gnawed relentlessly at her stomach, and she began to feel dizzy. She wondered if anyone would bring her food, or if she would have to stay in the market all night, shivering and weak. The sky turned a deeper orange, and the first stars appeared, twinkling faintly above the rooftops. Clara realized that night was coming, and with it, darkness that frightened her. The market, once loud and chaotic, was now almost empty. Rustle of leaves, the occasional whinny of a horse, and the far-off cry of a coyote. Each sound made her heart beat faster, a mixture of fear and hope. She thought of the stories she had heard in her short life. Tales of lost children found by kind strangers, of women and men who took in those who had no home, offering food, clothing, and love. Trying to convince herself that one of them might happen to her. She imagined a kind farmer, a merchant, or even a stranger passing by, noticing her small, fragile figure and deciding to help. It seemed like a dream, but without hope. She felt she would not survive the night. As the shadows grew longer and the market quieted further, Clara began to feel the first sting of despair. She was small, alone, and forgotten. Each passing moment that no one approached her made her question whether kindness truly existed. She shivered again, wrapping herself tighter in a feeble attempt to hold warmth. Her mind raced with thoughts of what she could do. Should she try to walk to another part of town? Should she shout louder? Or should she simply wait, hoping that someone would notice her? Even as fear pressed down on her, Clara refused to give up entirely. Somewhere deep inside, a spark of hope remained. She remembered the warmth of a smile, the gentle touch of a hand, even if it had been fleeting in the past. That memory became her anchor. She told herself that she would wait a little longer, that she would not give up because perhaps, just perhaps, someone would see her before the darkness of night settled completely. The wind carried the faint smell of cooked food from nearby homes. Clara's stomach twisted painfully at the aroma, but it also reminded her of what she was waiting for. A small kindness, a piece of bread, a warm blanket, someone who would care. Her mind filled with possibilities, and she imagined the person who might come. She pictured them stopping, looking down at her, and offering a smile that could chase away the fear and sadness she felt. As the first stars shone brighter in the sky, Clara's small body shook with both cold and anxiety. The market was now nearly deserted. A few lingering traders were packing up their last items, their footsteps echoing against the wooden planks. Clara held her breath every time someone approached, hoping that it might be the person who would change her fate. She had been alone for so long that even the slightest glance felt like a miracle. Her eyes wandered to the horizon, where the hills formed a dark silhouette against the fading light. She imagined herself leaving the market, wandering into the unknown, searching for someone who would notice her, but fear anchored her to the spot. She did not know the town well, and the darkness made it even more dangerous. The thought of being truly lost in the world made her stomach twist with worry. Yet still she sat, hoping, praying, and waiting. Hours passed, and the temperature dropped further. Clara's tiny body shivered uncontrollably, her teeth chattering. She rubbed her arms again, wishing she had even a thin blanket. She thought of the stars above, distant and cold, and felt a pang of loneliness. She whispered to herself, "Someone will come. Someone will see me. Someone will care." The words were almost a chant, a small act of defiance against the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. And then, as the last light of day faded and the shadows grew long and deep, Clara sensed movement in the quiet streets. She looked up with tired, hopeful eyes. Perhaps tonight, her story was about to change. Perhaps the kindness she had imagined all day, the warmth she had longed for, was finally on its way. Though she could not see who it was yet, her heart dared to hope that she would not be alone for much longer. In that quiet moment, crouched on the edge of the dusty market, Clara understood something important. Even when the world seemed harsh, even when people ignored her or turned away, she could still hold on to hope, inspiration, and hope, she realized, was stronger than fear. The first stars had begun to twinkle faintly in the night sky, and the market, once crowded and chaotic, had quieted almost completely. Clara sat alone, her small body trembling from cold, fatigue, and hunger. She had spent the entire day waiting, hoping, and praying for someone to notice her. Her thin arms wrapped around herself, trying to hold in warmth, but it was no use. The chill of the night air crept into her bones, and her stomach protested loudly with emptiness. She felt as if the world had forgotten her, as if she would remain invisible forever. But then, through the dim light of lanterns swinging in the market square, she noticed a figure approaching. At first, she thought it was a trick of her tired eyes, a shadow dancing in the corner of her vision. But as the figure drew closer, she realized it was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, moving carefully among the empty stalls. He carried himself with a calm, quiet confidence, different from the hurried merchants and loud townsfolk who had ignored her earlier. Something in his steps told her he was not going to pass by without noticing her. The man's eyes were kind and steady, and when they met Clara's, she felt a strange warmth in her chest. She could not speak. Her throat was dry and her voice had faded after hours of calling and being ignored. Brash. She merely stayed crouched on the dusty ground, hoping against hope that he would stop. The man paused a few feet away, crouched slightly to be closer to her level, and said gently, "Are you all right, little one?" Clara's heart raced. The words were soft, but they carried something she had not felt all day. genuine concern. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, afraid that if she opened her mouth, her voice might break. The man's eyes softened even more, and he took a slow step closer, his hands visible and empty, showing no threat. "It's all right," he said. "You don't need to be afraid." Clara's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. Fear, exhaustion, and hope collided inside her. She had been ignored all day, dismissed by merchants, children, and adults alike. Why would this man be different? But something in his voice, in the gentle way he carried himself, told her he was not like the others. He crouched a little lower, reaching slowly to place a hand near her shoulder, but not touching, only showing her he meant no harm. "Are you hungry?" he asked softly. "Bess." Clara nodded again, her lips trembling. "Do you need clothes?" Another nod. The man smiled faintly, almost as if he had been expecting her answer. "Come with me," he said. "Always on. I'll make sure you're safe."
For a moment, Clara hesitated. She had learned to be cautious with strangers.
People had abandoned her before, promised help, and disappeared. But the warmth in his voice, the calm in his eyes, and the way he carried himself gave her the courage to stand. Slowly she rose to her feet, trembling from cold and weakness, and followed him. Every step was careful, her bare feet scraping the dusty ground, but she did not turn back. Somehow she trusted him, more than anyone she had met all day. The man led her away from the market square, past closed shops and empty streets, and toward the edge of town where the light from lanterns faded into darkness. He moved slowly, allowing Clara to keep up, asking her gentle questions along the way. "What's your name?" he said. "Where did you come from?" Clara's voice came out as a whisper, hoarse from lack of use. "Clara," she said, barely audible. "I don't know," he nodded, as if understanding. "That's all right, Clara," he said. "You don't have to explain everything right now. Let's just make sure you're safe first." His words felt like a small shield against the fear that still gripped her. Clara had been alone, rejected, and ignored for so long that even a few words of kindness were enough to give her hope. She walked a little taller now, though her eyes remained wide and cautious, scanning every shadow and movement as she followed him. After a few minutes, the man reached a wide wooden gate that opened to a large ranch beyond. The land stretched far and wide, with green pastures, grazing cattle, and a few wooden buildings that glimmered softly in the lantern light. Clara had never seen anything so beautiful. The quiet of the ranch was different from the noisy, chaotic market. Here, the air smelled fresh, clean, and filled with the faint scent of hay and animals. Clara felt her shoulders relax for the first time in hours, the tension in her small body easing just slightly.
The man led her to one of the buildings, a small wooden house with a warm light glowing from inside.
"You can stay here tonight," he said. "We'll make sure you have food, clothes, and a warm bed." Clara's eyes widened in disbelief. "A bed?" she whispered. She had not slept properly in weeks, not since she had been left alone. She could hardly imagine a soft, warm place to rest, and yet the promise filled her with hope and relief. Inside, the house smelled of cooking food and fresh linen. A small fire burned in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the wooden walls. The man guided Clara to a chair and asked her to sit while he prepared some food. She watched him quietly, still unsure if this kindness was real. He moved with calm, deliberate motions, setting out a plate with bread, cheese, and some fruit.
The smell made her stomach ache,
with hunger. Eat, he said gently. You need your strength. Clara hesitated for a moment, then slowly took a piece of bread, her hands trembling. The first bite was like magic. The warmth of the food, the softness of the bread, and the sweetness of the fruit brought tears to her eyes. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, feeling nourishment for the first time in what felt like forever. The man watched her patiently, never rushing, never judging, only offering quiet support. When she had finished, he brought out a soft, clean blanket and some clothes. They were simple, but they were new and warm, and Clara felt almost like a new person as she changed into them. The rough dirt and tattered garments of the day were gone, replaced by something soft and protective. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel invisible or alone. She felt safe. Afterward, the man sat with her by the fire, speaking in quiet, calm tones. Clara, he said, you don't have to be afraid anymore. You're safe here. We'll take care of you. Clara's small hands clutched the blanket around her, and a tear slipped down her cheek. Bah. She nodded, unable to speak, overwhelmed by relief and gratitude. For the first time that day, she truly believed someone cared. As the night deepened, Clara learned more about the man who had found her. His name was Samuel, and he was a rancher who lived just outside the town. He had been at the market earlier that day buying supplies when he noticed her alone and frightened. Unlike the others who had ignored her, he had stopped, approached her gently, and decided to help. Clara listened quietly, absorbing every word, feeling the warmth of safety settle around her. Samuel told her about life on the ranch, about the animals, the wide fields, and the simple, honest work that filled his days. Clara's eyes widened as she imagined herself there, running across open fields, feeding animals, and finally having a place to call home. Her small heart, battered and frightened all day, began to fill with hope. She realized that kindness still existed in the world, and that sometimes help came from the most unexpected places. Before long, Samuel guided Clara to a small bedroom in the house. The bed was soft, with clean sheets and a warm blanket. Clara climbed in carefully, feeling the comfort and safety wrap around her like a shield. She rested her head on the pillow, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to close her eyes without fear. Samuel promised to check on her in the morning, and she believed him. She believed that she would not be left alone again. As she drifted toward sleep, Clara thought about the market, the people who had ignored her, and the hours she had spent feeling invisible. It seemed like a different life now, a memory of fear and loneliness that could not touch her here. Samuel's kindness had changed everything. She felt a small smile touch her lips, the first smile of the day, and allowed herself to hope. Dude. Tomorrow would bring a new life, one where she would no longer be alone, no longer invisible, and finally safe. And in that quiet, warm room, Clara understood something important. Even in a world that could be harsh and uncaring, a single act of kindness could change everything. One person noticing her, one gentle word, one small meal and a warm blanket had given her a new beginning, and for the first time in a long time, Clara felt ready to believe that life could be kind, that hope was real, and that she had a chance to be happy again. The morning sunlight filtered gently through the wooden windows of the small ranch house, casting a warm glow across the room. Clara stirred under the soft blanket, blinking against the brightness as the sounds of the ranch came to life outside. The lowing of cattle, the soft clatter of horseshoes against the ground, and the distant creak of a wagon welcomed her to a world so different from the dusty, crowded market where she had spent her days alone. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of peace. Samuel knocked lightly on the door before entering. "Good morning, Clara," he said with a kind smile. "Did you sleep well?" Clara nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. The warmth from the bed and the safety she felt in the room had made her sleep deeply. She realized that she had not felt this safe for a long, long time. Samuel handed her a simple dress, clean and soft, and Clara quickly changed. The feeling of clean clothes against her skin was unfamiliar, almost magical. She touched the fabric with awe and gratitude. "Breakfast is ready," Samuel said, leading her to the kitchen. The smell of warm bread, eggs, and fresh milk filled the air, and Clara's stomach rumbled in response. She had never eaten so heartily in one meal before, and she took her time, savoring every bite. Samuel watched patiently, never rushing her, letting her enjoy this small but important comfort. With each mouthful, Clara felt stronger, more alive, and more certain that she belonged here. After breakfast, Samuel guided her outside. The ranch stretched as far as Clara's eyes could see, wide green pastures bordered by wooden fences dotted with cattle grazing calmly and horses moving gracefully across the fields. Rays carried the scent of fresh grass and hay, and the sky was a brilliant, endless blue. Clara could hardly believe such a place existed. She had only known dust, market noise, and fear, and now she stood in a world of open skies and warmth. Samuel showed her around the ranch, introducing her to the animals. Clara met the horses first, their large, gentle eyes curious about the small new visitor. One horse nuzzled her hand carefully, and Clara laughed softly, a sound that had been missing from her life for far too long. She felt a connection with the animals immediately, sensing their calm presence and gentle nature. She learned to feed them, to brush their coats, and to speak softly so as not to startle them. Each small task gave her confidence, a sense of purpose, and joy she had not known before. Next, Samuel showed her the cows, goats, and chickens. Clara helped collect eggs, learning to handle them carefully, afraid of breaking them at first but guided patiently by Samuel. Each task, no matter how small, made her feel needed, useful, and appreciated. The simple rhythm of ranch life. The work, the care, the movement was soothing, giving her mind and body something to focus on beyond the fear and sadness that had filled her days in the market. As the morning turned to afternoon, Samuel taught her about the crops on the ranch. Rows of vegetables, herbs, and grains stretched across the fields, thriving under the careful attention of their caretaker. Clara learned to water the plants, pull weeds, and even plant seeds for the next season. The work was hard, but it filled her with pride. She had never thought she could accomplish so much in a day, and each new skill gave her confidence. She began to feel that she could face the world, not as a helpless girl abandoned in a market, but as someone capable, strong, and valued. After a few hours, they returned to the house for lunch. Samuel had prepared a simple meal, but it was warm and nourishing, just as breakfast had been. Clara sat quietly, eating and listening as Samuel spoke about the ranch's history and the life he had built there. He told her about the animals, the seasons, and the work needed to keep everything running smoothly. Clara listened with rapt attention, fascinated by the world he described. Each story, each explanation made her feel more connected to this place, more certain that she belonged. In the afternoon, Samuel taught her how to ride a horse. At first, Clara was nervous, unsure of how to balance herself and hold the reins properly. The horse was large and powerful, and she felt tiny on its back, but Samuel stood beside her, steadying the horse and guiding her hands. And slowly, step by step, Clara learned to trust both the horse and herself. The wind in her hair as they moved across the pasture brought a feeling of freedom she had never known. She laughed, a clear, joyful sound, feeling the thrill of movement and the joy of conquering her fear.
By evening, Clara had learned many things about the ranch and its animals.
She had gained confidence in her abilities, pride in her work, and a sense of belonging she had never imagined possible. Samuel smiled at her, clearly pleased with her progress. "You're learning quickly," he said. I knew you had a strong heart, Clara.
You just needed a place to grow. Clara's heart swelled with gratitude.
For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, appreciated, and loved. As night fell, Clara helped Samuel prepare the animals for bedtime. Horses were brought into their stalls, cows were fed, and the chickens settled in their coop. The routine was calming, a comforting rhythm that helped her feel safe. When everything was ready, they returned to the house, and Samuel prepared a warm dinner. Clara ate slowly, savoring the flavors, feeling her body restore its strength and warmth. After dinner, Samuel guided her to her room. The soft blanket and bed were even more inviting after a long day of new experiences and learning. Clara climbed in carefully, feeling the security of the warm sheets and the protection of the room around her. She thought about the days she had spent on the ranch, the animals, the fields, the work, and Samuel's kind guidance. It had been full of new experiences, but none had felt overwhelming or frightening. But peace. Instead, each moment had brought joy, comfort, and a sense of belonging she had never known before. Before she slept, Clara reflected on her journey. Only a few days ago, she had been alone in a crowded market, hungry, cold, and abandoned. Now, she had a safe place to sleep, warm clothes to wear, food in her belly, and someone who cared for her. Bah. She felt a wave of gratitude and relief wash over her. Tears came again, but this time they were tears of happiness. She realized how quickly life could change, and how a single act of kindness, Samuel noticing her in the market, had transformed her entire world. Clara closed her eyes, imagining the fields stretching endlessly before her, the animals she had cared for, and the bright morning sun. She felt a quiet excitement for the days ahead, knowing that each day would bring new experiences, new lessons, and new joys. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream of a future that was safe, full of love, and filled with possibilities. As she drifted off to sleep, she promised herself that she would remember the kindness shown to her and carry it in her heart forever. She would work hard, care for the animals, learn everything she could about life on the ranch, and grow strong, not just for herself, but to honor the trust and generosity that Samuel had shown her. And in the quiet of the night, wrapped in warmth and safety, Clara finally felt at home. The ranch, with its wide fields, gentle animals, and patient caretaker, had become more than just a place to stay. It was a world of hope, healing, and new beginnings. Clara understood that life could be kind, that even in a world that sometimes felt harsh and uncaring, there were people who would step forward and make a difference. Breath. She had found one such person in Samuel, and through his kindness she had discovered that she too could find strength, courage, and happiness. The night passed peacefully, and Clara slept deeply, dreaming of green pastures, playful animals, and the bright skies above. She knew that the coming days would be filled with learning, adventure, and new experiences, and she was ready to face them. For the first time in a long while, fear had been replaced with hope, loneliness with companionship, and uncertainty with the promise of a brighter future. The sun rose over the ranch once more, casting long shadows across the green pastures and sparkling on the dew-kissed grass. Clara stretched in her bed, feeling the warmth of the morning sun on her face. She had slept peacefully through the night, a rare comfort that made her heart feel lighter than it had in weeks. Today she felt ready to face the world in a way she never had before. The ranch no longer seemed strange or intimidating. It had become a place where she belonged, a place where she could be safe, grow, and even dream. After a simple breakfast of eggs, bread, and fresh milk, Samuel invited her to help with the morning chores. Clara eagerly agreed, her heart filled with anticipation and pride. Today she would care for the animals, tend to the fields, and continue learning the ways of ranch life. By each task she completed reminded her that she was capable and strong, despite the hardships she had endured in the market. She felt a new kind of joy, a mixture of accomplishment and belonging. Clara began with the horses. She brushed their coats carefully, moving her small hands in smooth, gentle strokes. The horses leaned into her touch, trusting her as she had come to trust them. She fed them hay and water, speaking softly to calm their restless movements. Samuel watched her quietly, offering guidance when needed, but mostly allowing her to take charge. Clara felt a surge of pride. She was no longer the small, invisible girl in the market. She was strong, capable, and important here. Next, she helped feed the cows and goats. She learned how to lead them carefully, ensuring none wandered off or became startled. The animals, sensing her growing confidence, responded to her touch and words. Clara laughed softly as a playful goat nudged her leg, and she felt a thrill of happiness she had not experienced in a long time. Her heart felt full, her mind focused on the present moment, and she realized that she was building a life she had never dared to imagine before. As the morning turned to afternoon, Clara joined Samuel in tending the crops. They walked through rows of vegetables, checking for weeds, watering plants, and planting seeds for the coming season. Patient. Each action was purposeful, a contribution to the life of the ranch. Clara felt the satisfaction of meaningful work, a feeling entirely new to her. The land seemed alive, responding to their care and effort, and Clara felt as if she were part of something much bigger than herself. She understood that life could be hard, but it could also be rewarding and beautiful. During a short break, Clara and Samuel sat under a large oak tree, the shade offering relief from the growing sun. Samuel offered her a cup of fresh water and a piece of bread. Clara drank slowly, savoring the simple pleasure, and then looked at Samuel with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but sincere.
Samuel smiled warmly. "You don't need to thank me, Clara. You're learning, growing, and finding your place. That is enough."
As the days passed, Clara's confidence grew. She learned to care for the animals independently, tend to the crops without constant guidance, and even handle small challenges that arose on the ranch.
One day, a young calf became stuck in the mud near the fence.
Clara quickly thought of the steps Samuel had taught her and carefully helped the calf free, guiding it back to solid ground. Samuel watched from a distance, pride shining in his eyes. Clara's small heart swelled with accomplishment. She realized that she was capable of making a difference, that she could handle problems, and that she was no longer helpless. Beyond the ranch work, Clara also began exploring the small town nearby. Samuel had told her she could go to the local school if she wished, and she eagerly accepted. For the first time in her life, Clara sat in a classroom, learning to read and write with guidance and encouragement. She discovered the joy of words, the power of knowledge, and the freedom that came with education. Each lesson, each new word made her feel smarter, more confident, and more ready to face the world. The townspeople who had once ignored her now looked at her differently. Some remembered seeing her in the market that day, small and abandoned, and they watched in admiration as she worked on the ranch, interacted with the animals, and learned at school. Slowly, Clara began to form friendships with other children in town. They played together, shared stories, and laughed in ways Clara had almost forgotten. She felt the warmth of community, a sense of belonging that extended beyond the ranch and into the town itself. One afternoon, Samuel asked Clara to help plant a small garden near the house. Together, they chose flowers, herbs, and vegetables to plant. Clara's eyes lit up with excitement as they dug, watered, and carefully placed each seed in the soil. The garden became more than just a source of food. It became a symbol of growth, care, and beauty. Clara understood that her life, like the garden, required attention, patience, and love to flourish.
Each tiny seed represented the hope she now carried in her heart.
As the weeks turned into months, Clara grew stronger, taller, and more confident. She developed routines, learned responsibility, and embraced the freedom of life on the ranch. Each day was full of discovery, from learning the quirks of different animals to understanding the rhythms of nature. She laughed freely, played without fear, and felt the deep satisfaction of accomplishment. She had transformed from the small, abandoned girl in the market into a young person with purpose, hope, and joy. Samuel continued to guide her, offering wisdom, encouragement, and support. He treated her like family, never pressuring her but always showing patience and care. Clara began to trust him fully, sharing her thoughts, dreams, and even small fears. Their bond grew strong, built on mutual respect and kindness. She felt safe to express herself, to make mistakes, and to learn from them. The love and trust between them became a cornerstone of her new life. One day, Clara and Samuel took a walk to the nearby town square. She noticed the familiar market, once a place of fear and loneliness, now looked different. She walked confidently, holding her head high, and realized she was no longer invisible. People nodded politely, recognizing her growth and strength. Clara felt a sense of pride, knowing that she had overcome fear, hardship, and uncertainty. She had earned her place in the world through courage, perseverance, and the guidance of someone who believed in her. At home, Clara began to take on more responsibilities around the ranch. She organized tasks, helped Samuel plan for the animals and crops, and even taught some of the younger children in the town about caring for animals and plants. Her life was full, meaningful, and purposeful. Grasp, she discovered that her experiences, even the painful ones, had taught her resilience, empathy, and wisdom beyond her years. She felt capable of helping others, just as Samuel had helped her. As Clara looked out over the ranch one evening, the sky ablaze with the colors of sunset, she reflected on her journey. She remembered the dusty market, the hours of fear and hunger, and the loneliness that had pressed down on her heart. But now, here she was, surrounded by green fields, gentle animals, friends, and the steady, caring presence of Samuel. She had found safety, belonging, and a sense of purpose. Her life had changed in ways she had never imagined, and she felt gratitude that filled her small heart to the brim. Clara realized that life's hardships could be overcome with hope, courage, and kindness. She understood that one small act of compassion, Samuel noticing her in the market, had transformed everything. It had given her the chance to grow, learn, and discover the strength within herself. She had learned that even in a world that could be harsh, there were people who would care, and that she could build a life filled with love, joy, and meaning. The months passed and Clara continued to thrive. She excelled in school, cared for the ranch with skill and dedication, and built friendships that brought laughter and comfort to her days. Her days were full of learning, discovery, and adventure, and each night she went to bed with a heart full of hope and gratitude. She had discovered the beauty of a life where she was valued, loved, and capable of making a difference. One evening, as Clara helped Samuel gather the animals for the night, she paused and looked at the stars above. She thought about her journey, from the crowded, uncaring market to this wide-open ranch where she had found safety and belonging. She smiled softly, knowing that she had grown into someone brave, strong, and full of hope. Life had given her a second chance, and she had embraced it fully. In that quiet moment, Clara understood something deeply important. The world could be harsh, people could be unkind, and life could be difficult, but kindness, courage, and hope could transform even the darkest moments. She had found a home, a family in Samuel, friends in the town, and a life full of possibilities. Her journey had taught her that no matter how small or abandoned one might feel, a single act of kindness could change everything. And as she returned to the warmth of the house, the soft glow of the fire welcoming her, Clara knew that she had finally found her place in the world. She had been abandoned, ignored, and invisible once, but now she was seen, loved, and valued. Her heart was full, her spirit strong, and her life rich with hope, joy, and the promise of tomorrow. Clara's story, once filled with fear and uncertainty, had blossomed into a story of resilience, courage, and the transformative power of kindness. She had learned to trust, to grow, and to embrace life fully. And in the wide open fields of the ranch, under the endless sky, Clara finally knew that she was home, and that her life, once abandoned, was now filled with love, purpose, and endless possibility.